In this video, I'm going to go way back to high school and probably even before high school, but high school was when I remembered it being very emphasized. Depression is a feeling that has been very familiar to me throughout my entire life. I've done enough work on myself to know why it ever started for me to begin with. I'm not going to explore any of that. But you gotta love repetition, compulsion, you gotta love familiarity, you gotta love all that stuff. I'm just kidding. Kind of being sarcastic there. High school for me was very depressive for many different reasons. But what I really want to focus on is the people that I attracted in high school. Again, no names. I will not name any names here. What I'm going to say is that I attracted people that basically mirrored my beliefs about myself, which further led me into more deeper spiraling depression and anxiety, of course, right? But there was something so fascinating about this time in my life back in high school, and that was that I was so deeply fucking miserable with myself that I looked at people that were happy and I was kind of like, ugh, right? And I don't know how much this has to do with like attracts like, misery loves company, this, that, and the other, right? I mean, like attracts like and misery love company, I wouldn't say are the same thing. Like attracts like, happy people attract each other, miserable people attract each other, depressed people attract, so on and so forth. But this was seriously such an interesting time in my life. It really was. Interesting because I was repulsive towards people that were happy. Why? Not just because like attracts like, but I didn't want people that were happy to be around me because I was so miserable with myself. I was so depressed, right? When you are depressive consistently, elevated emotions just don't make sense to you, right? Jolly fucking Roger is walking down the road singing a nice ass tune is not going to appeal because it's not depressive. And this also corresponds with everything else that was going on at that time in my life. I had just started getting into heavier music, like heavy metal, and with that, somebody screaming at me, right? The music that I was listening to, it mirrored my internal state. Of course, that's how it works. Like attracts like. That's just the way that it works, right? But what's so fascinating, and this is really what I'm trying to get at here, because this is really the fabric of everything. It is so easy to get locked inside of a depressive way of living if you don't do anything about it, right? I'm a huge believer in changing the way that you are just by changing your energy. I mean, that's just the way that it works, right? Nothing outside of you is really going to do anything. You have to realize it for yourself, right? I mean, it's so fascinating because I spent like my entire life trying to change people and everything. People change when they want to, not by force outside of them, just when they want to, right? But back then, depressive feelings of anxiety were so familiar, they were so right, they were so natural, that joy just didn't make sense to me, right? How could you possibly... I mean, I was projecting all of my pain and insecurities and damage out onto the world around me. So I was looking at people that were happy, and I was basically being like, what the fuck is your problem? Look at this god-awful ass world. This is terrible. This place is a fucking shit show. the world is terrible, the world is bad, this, that, and the other. Black and white thing, or black or white thinking, right? So I wanted nothing to do with joy. And that's the thing too, like, regardless of where you're at, right? If you're happy, if you're joyful, you want downers the fuck out of your life, right? But if you're a downer, you don't want joyous, happy people in your life, right? Those two opposites. It's such a fascinating thing to see for what it is. Like attracts like. And so when I was caught inside of that, I couldn't see anything else. I really couldn't, right? And there was actually, this is the fascinating thing about this entire journey. There was a point in my life when, I think this was like back in like, I don't know. This was sometime between like 2010 and 2015 or 17. What started happening was I started to, yeah, this will be a fascinating story. I started to become very tired of being unhappy, being non-joyous, right? And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of being anxious all the fucking time, this, that, and the other. I'm done with it. I'm just going to be happy, right? That didn't last long. Why? Because it wasn't real. My drive to get happy and to get joyous was real. However, I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody what they can or can't do. But from what I've learned and understand, if you're a depressed person, if you're just fucking anxious all the time and you're just not happy, you probably have things to process and work through. You probably have trauma, specifically coming from childhood, right? And that's just the way that it is, right? So I tried to like bypass the shit out of my stuff. I like, fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore. Fuck this depression. Fuck this sadness. Fuck this fucking anxiety. This, that, and the other. I'm just gonna be happy. Yeah, no. It doesn't work that way. And so then I started getting myself help, right? And that's when everything really started to change, right? Started diving deeper into my life and everything. And I'm not going to go any further with that part of this. But what I'm going to say is that oftentimes, if what it is that you're familiar with is like things like, you know, depression, anxiety, all that stuff, all the low energy emotions, not calling them good or bad, everything is communication. The way that you feel is communication, right? The way that your body is expressing itself, whether it's depression, whatever it is, right? It's just communicating to you something. And you can choose to do something with that or not, right? What I understand is that I couldn't just be like, fuck this depression, fuck this anxiety, I'm just going to be happy. I don't think it works that way. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, you can totally fucking disidentify from yourself. That's a lot to do with what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about in the entire universe of, you know, quantum reality and everything, disidentifying from the self that you are and becoming a new self and just saying fuck everything from the past, right? But I think that to a very large degree it's important to integrate everything, right? There are things that I didn't even know about myself a decade ago, right, that I do now that literally changes everything, right? And the depression just fades away. The anxiety just fades away. I mean, you know, I did things. I meditated on a daily basis, twice a day for, I don't know, 5 to 7 years. Like, I did things and I'm grateful for that. But really, like, just understanding the structure of everything and how everything works, right? If you are fucking unhappy, if you're depressed, if you are anxious, right, it's probably there for a reason. But it's also important to understand that like attracts like. So the reason why you don't find people that are joyous and happy attractive is because you're just not interested in that because of where you're vibrating at. You're in pain. You're in, you know, you've got the damage that you've got, and maybe it's time to learn how to mend things, right? I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I'm not. I'm just here to look at the fascinating parallel between, you know, my near sincere dislike for happy and joyous people because I was in such a tremendous amount of pain and actually fucking doing the work to heal, right? I had zero interest in having anything to do with people that were joyous and happy and fulfilled and peaceful, right? Because I was the exact opposite way, right? And then I tried to just fake it and force it and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna be happy. Yeah, no, that doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I'll make this very clear. If you consistently wake up feeling depressed, you're going to consistently feel depressed. If you choose to change that daily, consistently, with conscious effort and intention, you can actually change your life. So I'm not going to say that that just doesn't work, because that is, again, what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about. But, you know, I think that there's a vital and important element in, like, actually learning about your trauma, the damage, everything that fucked you up, right? Because then you can actually learn about your patterns, learn about who you are as a person, gain self-awareness, and that's fucking awesome, and that can really change a lot, in my honest opinion. But yeah, if you are a depressed, anxious person who is just consistently vibrating at lower energy emotions, you're not going to be interested in people that are joyous and happy, right? You're probably going to look at them and be like, what's going on with you? Look at this crazy ass fucked up world, right? Yeah, I've been there. And I'm moving on to the other side of the spectrum now. It's a really cool journey. It really is.